It's like we were having meeting in the cafeteria. It was like we had meeting passing goods on. Very powerful because of the silence, because of that distinctively Quaker attitude. It's still part of me. A lot of us were concerned that people didn't understand the effects of war on the native population of Vietnam, the people who were Vietnamese. That war devastated their food supply. Now, at that time, the Students for Democratic, what was it, Society? I don't remember what's even, SDS is what it was, initials were. They were a pretty vocal group. They'd have meetings up on the quad. And we wanted to do something that wouldn't be so noisy and not maybe quite so controversial in a sense. I mean, SDS was looking to polarize. We just wanted to put some simple things out there. Like, here's what's happening to Vietnamese people. And that was it. And after some real consideration, some silence, and talking very simply, we determined that we would, a bunch of us, take on the discipline of eating the diet that a Vietnamese peasant would have. And that we would do that even in our non-public times. But that we would do it publicly at lunchtime in the big dining hall in Willard Straight Hall, which is sort of like the student union at Cornell. And that we would not only do it there, but that we would do it in Quaker silence, sitting at one table. And that if somebody asked what we were up to, then answer in very few words, and then relapse into silence. We had one table. We did this for 2 weeks. We all really kept it. I never ate a bit of food for breakfast before I came, or for dinner after I was gone, either. It was my discipline. I kept it, and I'm sure that everyone else did too. The only difference from what a Vietnamese peasant would have eaten was perhaps the quality of the rice, but also that a doctor insisted that we must have some orange juice every day. Otherwise we'd become really ill because we wouldn't be used to that kind of a diet. And so we did go along with that. Now, all I can say is that we held to that discipline of being silent and only speaking if asked directly by somebody, what are you up to? And we would answer in very few words. It was extraordinarily dramatic that it was silent. It was also extraordinarily dramatic what we were doing, and that we were doing it all together. By the end of the 2 weeks that we had committed to, we had 3 tables full of people who had joined us, some of whom remained Quakers then, but people who said, this I can join in with. And they sat, they took on our discipline, and whether they did or not for breakfast and dinner, it wasn't the point. And I think most of them did actually. But here was 2 big tables worth of people sitting in silence and saying, this is what war has caused. It wasn't saying, fight the war. It wasn't being against anything, although it was being against hunger. It was non-political. It just said, this is something that we care about because of what it's doing to people. later, and I'm sure this was something that happened over, well, I know it happened over a much wider group of Quakers than just an Ithaca meeting, but it came to our attention that medical supplies, which went into the hands of the American Red Cross to be sent to Vietnam, would only be used for American or South Vietnamese troops or people in the area controlled by them. And we felt that medical supplies should be nonpartisan. It also became apparent that most other, at least the Canadians, Red Cross, did not make that political distinction, that anybody who needed the supplies that the Canadian Red Cross had would get them. Didn't matter whether they were North Vietnamese, whether they were part of the army or just a civilian or whatever, as well as, of course, the Canadian and American troops and so on. And that we decided we wanted to give to the Red Cross, but that we wanted to give to this Canadian Red Cross. So we set up a gigantic line. This took a real coordination. I mean, so this was many, many meetings across the southern tier and up into the Great Lakes area, up to the Ontario area, Rochester and so on. Anyway, we all assembled, and there was a gigantic truck filled with medical supplies on the American side, and we had it pull up near the Peace Bridge in Niagara Falls that leads over to Canada. And we set up 2 lines, I believe, passing goods, one to the other, silently passing, and it went over the bridge, passing on the chain of people, over the bridge to Canadians, who then silently passed it down to a truck belonging to the Canadian Red Cross. And it was the silence that was mentioned almost immediately in newspaper account of it. How striking it was. This was like an activity of meeting. It's like we were having meeting in the cafeteria. It was like we had meeting passing goods on. Very powerful because of the silence, because of that distinctively Quaker attitude. It's still part of me. So now I'll tell you something else that happened once. Now, in the room that we used for meeting in Willard Straight Hall at Cornell at the time, it was built into the side of a hill. I mean, if you know Ithaca, it is nothing but, it is hills. So you came in, and the meeting we were in just had one window that was way up high on the wall, and it was it was in one of those wells that you have that puts it right below ground level, but somebody has some plants and so on in there. And one spring, first day, we were having a meeting, and it was a noisy meeting, barely on the edge of what really Quakers would want. It was all because of the war. It was right after there had been some particular bombing mission that had taken place which made the news. I'm not sure which one. And it was going on. And people were standing up. And there wouldn't be 3 minutes until somebody stood up and said something else. And some of them would be pretty overheated and maybe a little louder than might usually happen in a friend's meeting. And then, I hesitate to use the word old lady, because she was probably younger than I am now, but it does seem that the people with some age at least have a little, and all these people standing up and being upset. And then this one woman stood up and she said, "From where I'm sitting, I can see the daffodils blooming outside through our one window. And I'm reminded that the rest of the church-type world today is celebrating Easter. Let's just remember that." She sat down, and there wasn't another word spoken all morning. It was such a Quaker moment. "Let's consider," said she, in essence, "what else is in this world right now." And it was an astonishing moment, I'll never forget it. Because it really, well, like I said, it was an exceptionally Quaker moment, as were all those other two things I described. But that's the kind of thing that happened often in friends' meetings. I've seen things like that happen even without wars going on, but just special moments that come out of the silence. So for me, it's the silence. When I come to these old meeting houses, sometimes if I'm early or if it's not many in attendance, that can happen in these very rural meetings here sometimes. Very few people might come. I'll sit in silence, and I myself find myself having meeting with the spirits of all those who once sat here. I think back to my Quaker ancestors, and I place them into a meeting house that I'm in sometimes and just think, what were you saying? What were you thinking? What were you finding in the inner light? What struggles were you having and that you got through because you were in meeting and grappling with things, grappling with the issues that were facing you? That's what the meeting is about. It's not just peace, it's finding peace in yourself by grappling with the issues you have. You'll never have peace if you don't grapple. They say you have to fight for peace. It doesn't mean fighting physically. It means you've got to fight in here. You've got to find where the peace is. You hold the light to that.